Moving on, the United Nations has addressed the incident involving U.S. President Donald Trump at the Central Assembly. According to the United Nations, the escalator may have been turned off after Trump's videographer accidentally tripped a safety switch while going up backwards ahead of the president. The UN also clarified that the teleprompter used during Trump's address was controlled exclusively by the White House. This comes after Trump raised allegations that the United Nations had interfered with his speech, suggesting that the equipment might have been tampered with an intention to embarrass him. The United Nations denied any intentional action, explaining that the incident was a simple accident involving the videographer. The president has been vocal about what he sees an obstruction during his public appearances, making this incident a new focus for his claims. The United Nations has emphasized that safety measures and technical controls are standard procedures and not targeted at any individual. Andrew Leung on the telecast with me. Andrew, how do you react to these allegations that have been made by U.S. President Donald Trump? Of course, the United Nations at this point of time responding, saying that, it was the White House that was managing Donald Trump's teleprompter when he was making that UNGA speech. And with regards to the escalator stopping midway, it may have been Trump's videographer who may have tripped the switch, stopping the escalator.
Well, forget about the teleprompter, because this is really nothing. It's just a side issue. What was at stake in Trump's long speech and convoluted as it is the fact that the United Nations has proven to be highly ineffectual, and not because of its bureaucracy, although that, of course, accounts for a great deal of the lack of progress and the costs, but then the whole infrastructure has now outlived its usefulness, because the decisions, the final decisions, the single country veto is enshrined in this existing framework, which, as you pointed out, as a legacy of the end of the Second World War, which does not reflect the power levers in this world. It consists of the victors of the Second World War, the United States, and then Britain, and then France, Russia, and China. So these five nations, each of them is given a veto, a single vote veto on anything. And then, of course, the rising influence of the Global South, for example, the Arab League, the African Union, the organizations representing the South America, the African Union, they're not represented. And a lot of secondly, the global crisis allowed to fester until it's too late. And then when it's too late, then the members of the Security Council would each look after its own individual interests. And that, of course, creates a deadlock on any effective decision of the United Nations, because no country would be able to handle sometimes of these conflicts involve different great powers, and you need a mechanism to really draw in the great powers well in advance before the crisis comes to a boiling point. And so there's a lack of
There has been criticism that has been focused on how the United Nations has been functioning over the years, particularly in wake of the New World Order and the change of dynamics in the international relations. You rightly mentioned about how there is no proper representation of the Global South, which in fact is 2/3 of the population of the entire world. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also said that United Nations is a weak forum now, and if it is not able to stop the war between Ukraine and Russia, there is likelihood of countries wanting to expand their territories by way of invasionary tactics. How do you have to respond to that?
Well, apart from the framework of the United Nations, because the United Nations just can't on its own solve the problems, for example, over Gaza, over Ukraine, and then the powers, the key levers of power themselves have got to get a good grasp of the situation. But the tragedy is that all the great powers, they want to push the envelope. For example, on Ukraine, only recently, President Trump was telling Zelensky in his face that Zelensky had no cards to play. And it was only about a couple of weeks ago. And all of a sudden, he said, well, Ukraine can recover all the territories and even more. More means even maybe even getting some Russian territories on the side of Ukraine. I mean, this is really crazy. So there's no way that, that Putin would agree to that.
Okay, all right. All right, Andrew, thank you very much for joining us on the telecast and sharing your views.